Now we have in chapter 13 here, and the great theme of this chapter is warning against and the test of false prophets and false gods. This is a very remarkable chapter, and we'll be dealing with this here and also later. Now, he says, if there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto thee, saying, let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them, thou shalt not hearken unto the words of the prophet, or that dreamer of dreams. Now, friends, this is the answer to a great many people today that say, well, how do you explain, Dr. McGee, that some of these false prophets around today, they're accurate at times? And how do you explain that apparently in certain meetings, some people seem to get a healing? How do you explain that? Well, I don't explain it. To begin with, I think there'll probably be a natural explanation for it, but I don't need to go into that. God says that when a false prophet comes along and performs a sign and comes to pass, you are not to believe him if he denies the great truths of the Christian faith. That is the principle that is put down here. It's very important. And he says, and that prophet and that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he hath spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. And when these false prophets attempt to take you into some false cult, a false religion, why, notice what the penalty was then was death. They were to be stoned to death. This is something here that they should know. Now, when we get to the 18th chapter of Deuteronomy, he'll give us a test for false prophets. Israel had no problem in detecting false prophets. That is, they were given a biblical test, a God-given test, that surely would ferret them out. Now, I want to read beginning at verse 5. And that prophet, or that dreamer of dreams, shall be put to death, because he hath spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord thy God commanded thee to walk in. So shalt thou put the evil away from the midst of thee. Now, this is something here, friends, that today has a marvelous application for us, and it reveals the mind of God. There was a time in this nation, I can remember as a boy, that the reading of the Bible in the schoolroom was just a normal procedure. I remembered as a boy, I must confess, I don't think it was ever very meaningful to me, but that doesn't mean that it was not important to have that. I do recall that it was the Word of God, and that was probably the only impression left upon me was, well, this is the Word of God. But today we have let the unbeliever come in. We've let those that are in cults and those that actually are opposed to Christianity in the Bible, and I'm not sure today, but what they are the majority, and they have taken over. Now, that could never have happened in Israel, because here is something that was very extreme. If there appeared in Israel one who was attempting to take God's people away from the worship of God, why, extreme surgery was used. And friends, when you got a cancer, the best thing is to cut it out. I've learned that personally, that that's the way that you must deal with it. And this may seem extreme to a few soft-hearted and soft-headed folk, but this is the way God dealt with it, because it was an awful cancer that came in. And if you want to know how bad it really was for God's people in that day, read the story of Ahab and Jezebel. That plunged the nation into idolatry and brought the judgment of God upon them, that eventuated in them being carried into captivity. That is the northern kingdom. Now, that's how serious it is.